Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro met with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping in Moscow, Russia, to strengthen bilateral cooperation. Pope Leo XIV officiated the first Mass of his pontificate in the Sistine Chapel in front of all cardinals. Panama's popular sectors and unions continue mobilizing to demand the cancellation of the Social Security reform law. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR Studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. On the morning of May 9th, the Victory Parade was held in Moscow to commemorate the victory of the Red Army over Nazi Germany and the end of World War II. The event began after the arrival of President Vladimir Putin and other heads of state. Before the parade began, President Putin addressed the Russian people with a speech paying tribute to the history and sacrifice of the Soviet Red Army soldiers on the battlefield. After this, in honor of the fallen Soviet soldiers, a minute of silence was made. Military troops from various countries took part in the parade, followed by several units of the legendary T-34 tank, a symbol of Soviet victory.
The Soviet Union received the cruelest blows from the enemy. Millions of people who were peaceful civilian workers took up arms and fought in every battle. They took part in the decisive battles in Moscow. They also defended Belarus, which was the first to receive the enemy. The heroism of the people of Leningrad. All those who were in the rear and as partisans, all those who worked at the work front to the point of exhaustion.
After witnessing the military parade on the Red Square, Russian President Vladimir Putin, accompanied by the leaders of China and Venezuela, honored the memory of the fallen combatants with a minute of silence and a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. The site is one of the most emblematic places of the Russian capital, located next to the Kremlin Wall in the Alexander Garden. The presidents of Venezuela and Cuba were sent off with a standing ovation by the Russian people in Moscow's emblematic Red Square after the Victory Day parade. In this context, the Venezuelan head of state, Nicolás Maduro, thanked the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, and the Russian people for the extraordinary hospitality during his visit in the framework of the occasion on the commemoration of the 80th anniversary of the victory of the Red Army in the Great Patriotic War. The presence of Venezuela and Cuba in this commemorative act highlights the close relationship between the countries, as well as the importance they attach to the historical memory and the fight against fascism. Venezuela congratulated the peoples and governments of Russia and the former Soviet Union nations on the 80th anniversary of their victory in the Great Patriotic War. In an official communique, the government of the Bolivarian nation stated, Venezuela honors the memory of the heroes and martyrs who confronted the machinery of death and paid tribute to the victims of supremacist hatred. their example remains a moral compass for the present. It reminds us that there are struggles that admit no ambiguity. Furthermore, the Venezuelan government highlighted that with peace won but with blood built an order based on truth, justice and non-repetition, warning that today that order is under attack by those who whitewash fascism, manipulate history and promote new forms of extermination. To forget is to allow it to be repeated, to remain silent is to be accomplice. Today, our peoples know what it means to confront these threats. In its closing remarks, the Venezuelan government reaffirmed, "We are united in the struggle against the imperial aggressions, hybrid warfare, illegal sanctions, and the arrogance of those who believe that the world belongs to them. Our answer is clear. A multipolar, free, sovereign world. That is today's victory, and it's a daily battle. Venezuela celebrates together with its strategic allies this luminous date, because 80 years ago Nazism was defeated and the dignity of the peoples triumphed." Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro met with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping in Moscow, Russia, to strengthen bilateral cooperation. The meeting between the two presidents served as a space to reaffirm their commitment to cooperation and fraternal ties. The president of the Asian giant, Xi Jinping, declared that he will firmly support Venezuela in the defense of its sovereignty, national dignity, and social stability. Let us remember that Caracas and Beijing have a path of cooperation in the plan of 7 transformations that the government of Venezuela has for the recovery of the country and to face the unilateral coercive measures imposed by the United States. Also, Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Brazilian counterpart Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva held a bilateral meeting this Friday as part of the Victory Day celebrations. The Russian head of state emphasized the joint work with the Brazilian leader to strengthen relations between the countries, stressing that they are constantly developing. The Brazilian president in turn expressed his interest in discussing military, space, scientific, economic, educational and energy issues, as well as his aim to strengthen the strategic partnership with Russia. The Russian president affirmed that Brazil represents an important part of his country's trade volume with the Latin American and Caribbean region. And now we have a short break coming up, but first remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates and more. We'll be right back, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Pope Leo XIV officiated the first Mass of his pontificate in the Sistine Chapel in front of all cardinals, the ones who had been on the conclave and those older than 80 years old who are in Rome. The first Pope, born in the U.S. but with Peruvian nationality too, entered the Sistine Chapel dressed in white with the mitre and crozier. As part of his agenda, next Sunday at noon, the new Bishop of Rome will pray the Regina Coeli prayer from the Central Loggia of St. Peter's Basilica. He will also meet on Monday with all the media workers accredited to the press office of the Holy See who have covered the events of the past few weeks. The Chinese government has congratulated Pope Leo XIV on his election as head of the Catholic Church and expressed its desire to continue a constructive dialogue with the Vatican. This was announced by the spokesman of the Chinese Foreign Ministry.
We congratulate Cardinal Robert Prevost on his election as the new pope. It is hoped that under the new pope's leadership, the Vatican will continue to engage in constructive dialogue with China and conduct in-depth communication on international issues of mutual concern. We will jointly promote continued improvement of relations and contribute to world peace, stability, and development prosperity.
In Peru, the Bishop of Callao, Luis Alberto Barrera, showed the place where Pope Leo XIV lived and worked. Barrera made a tour of the archdiocese, recalling all the times that the current and recently elected Pope has lived in Peru. Among other things, he showed a series of pictures showing the late Pope Francis and the current pontiff and highlighted that he was a good man. Prevost, 69 years old and newly elected Pope, is a native of the United States who arrived in Peru for the first time 4 decades ago and received Peruvian citizenship. Venezuela recalled the message of hope and faith that the now Pope Leo XIV sent to the Venezuelan people in 2023. In a resurfaced video, the then Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost shared a message of hope, faith and unity in the framework of the feast held that year for Our Lady of Coromoto, patron saint of Venezuela. The pontiff prayed for the country and expressed his joy for being able to participate in the celebration from afar. The Catholic leader also wished for Venezuela the company of God and his model of love and hospitality. The newly elected Pope Leo XIV has been attached to the Cuban people since his first visit in 2008. After the passage of a hurricane, the then Father Robert Francis Prevost visited Puerto Padre Las Tunas, where he provided support with medicines and other logistical first aid necessities. It was one of the 2 visits he had paid to the Cuban country, one in 2008 and the other in 2011. The Cubans remember with affection the work done by the new pontiff and the ties he forged with the inhabitants of the places he stopped by. Panama's popular sectors and unions continue mobilizing to demand the cancellation of the Social Security reform law. In this regard, social groups stress the indefinite character of the ongoing strike they are carrying and cataloged as traitors of the homeland those members of Congress who approved the law for the reform of the Social Security system. They also condemned the position of Panamanian President José Raúl Mulino, who stated that he will not participate in the dialogue with the social groups regarding the pension reform law. In this context, unions also urged the government to annul the agreement with the United States on the installation of military bases. In Venezuela, flight number 21 arrived Friday at Maiquetía International Airport to bring 168 migrants back home as part of the return to the homeland governmental plan. In this regard, U.S. authorities unfolded that 200 Venezuelans were allegedly aboard the aircraft, which departed from Texas, United States, being the 6th one from the U.S. to land on Venezuela. However, 32 less nationals traveled on that flight. Therefore, Maduro's government urged Washington not to continue separating families, most of whom are relatives of the Venezuelans kidnapped in Secot prison in El Salvador. Over 3,000 nationals, including 483 in less than 48 hours, have been able to come back to their roots thanks to the governmental implementation of the Return to the Homeland Plan. Chilean authorities confirmed the death of 6 individuals aboard an ambulance plane that disappeared on Wednesday night as it headed to the country's northern region from the capital. Gonzalo Duran, presidential spokesman for the metropolitan region, confirmed the death of the 6 passengers of the aircraft that went down in Curacaví after identifying the wreckage of the plane during an aerial operation led by the Chilean Air Force. In addition, the Air Force reported that the aircraft was detected by the crew of an MH-60 mid-M Black Hawk helicopter belonging to Aviation Group Number 9 in the Curacaví area near Lepe at 3:50 p.m. local time. In this scenario, the prosecutor in charge of the investigation stated that the circumstances that caused the accident will be determined at the moment the relevant data is known. We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Fun and short break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to From the South. The United Nations warned that over 2 million Gazans suffer daily from severe drinking water shortages. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on the human rights to safe drinking water and sanitation, Pedro Agudo, reported Israeli military operations had destroyed over 70% of the water system. The human rights experts were further noted that this condition had prevented access to pumping drinking water, labeling the situation as a time bomb. Likewise, the diplomat highlighted the vast majority of the population had received a minimal water amount, and in some cases they had been given contaminated water, which posed a great threat to health. Palestinian authorities have denounced that Israeli occupation forces had committed over 12,000 massacres in the Gaza Strip since 2023. The Gazan Health Authority confirmed that such inhumane Israeli onslaught had claimed more than 52,000 Palestinians' lives, in addition to over 10,000 missing persons. Subsequently, the Gazan government media office accused Israel of both genocide and the execution of an ethnic cleansing in Palestinian lands by using all means to sustain a humanitarian crisis there. Likewise, Gazan officials reported that over 2,200 entire families have been wiped out, while 5,000 families just have one member alive. In addition, they noticed women, children, and the elderly have been the most affected. This Friday, hundreds of thousands of Yemenis mobilized in support of Gaza and to celebrate the defeat of the U.S. aggression against their territory. Yemeni media reported that hundreds of thousands of people marched with both Yemeni and Palestinian flags in the province of Saada and also in the city of Sana'a, the country's capital, in solidarity with Palestine and its struggles. Under the slogan, "To support Gaza by the power of God, we defeated the United States and we will defeat Israel," the participants carried banners calling for freedom to support their armed forces after the attacks of the American and Zionist enemies. Every Friday, several cities and towns in Yemen gather their people to defend their sovereignty and demand a ceasefire in Gaza and their freedom. In Lebanon, the Israeli army carried out an aerial aggression in the south of the country in a new violation of the ceasefire agreement in force since November 2024. The Zionist army perpetrated over 15 airstrikes targeting areas of Nabatije, Kafar, Ruman, and other cities, according to reports from the Lebanese national news agency ANN. In this regard, the Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam declared that the ongoing Israeli attacks constitute a violation of Resolution 1701 and should be stopped immediately. According to Israeli media, the occupation attacked an important target in Lebanon and pretends to maintain their attacks on the Islamic resistance movement Hezbollah. The line of control that divides the disputed region of Kashmir between India and Pakistan was the scene of the 15th exchange of fire amid one of the worst military escalations in the region. This exchange of fire comes at a day after India denounced an aerial attack by Pakistan against several of its military stations, which included the use of missiles and drones. As reported by the Indian Army, several houses in the region were affected during the offensive, which was was repelled without causing any fatalities. In response, the government of Pakistan denied having carried out such an offensive, describing India's accusation as fake news, allegedly to justify its aggressions in the territory. The Constitutional Court of Romania approved the results of the first round of the presidential elections held on May 4th. The court rejected as unfounded a request for the annulment of the elections filed by the presidential candidate of the New Romania Party, Sebastian Constantin Popescu. According to the results published by the Electoral Commission, the candidate of the Alliance for the Union of Romanians, George Simion, obtained 40.96%, while independent Nicu Sordan obtained 20.99%. In this context, a second round of elections is scheduled for Sunday, May 18th, where right-wing nationalist leaders Simon and Nicu Sordan, the current mayor of Bucharest, will face each other. Spain's Congress of Deputies approved on Thursday an ambitious economic plan to respond to the trade tariffs imposed by the United States. The so-called Trade Response and Recovery Plan, which will mobilize more than 14.1 billion euros, aims to support companies and workers that may be affected by trade barriers. Of the total amount, 7.4 billion will correspond to the new lines of financing, while the rest will be channeled through existing instruments. Among the most vulnerable sectors are wine, olive oil, and steel producers, traditional pillars of Spanish exports. The plan was approved by 176 votes in favor against 169 against and 4 abstentions. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok as well. For Telesur English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.